There's a couple of hands which I tend to call trouble hands. Ace with the low kicker. Of course, there's a reason for people liking the ace in their hand. Ace is the biggest card. You make the highest pair when the ace comes on the flop, but you're not the only one at the table who thinks that way. A lot of times you will have 2, 3 people in there, and they're all there because they have an ace in their hand. So if you're sitting there with an ace-4 and you're up against another guy with an ace-9, you're in a lot of trouble. Even if the ace comes on the board, you flop a pair of aces, you feel like, hey, this is a good hand. You might be up against somebody with a bigger ace. So it can create a lot of trouble, the ace with the weak kicker. Another very tough starting hand is the low to middle pairs. Again, it looks like you're starting out with a good hand, decent hand, which you are, but they're very tough to play. And sometimes when you have a medium small pair as a pair of 5s or pair of 6s, you're hoping to catch that other 5, that other 6 to flop 3 of a kind. Makes a really strong hand. The trouble is sometimes when you flop that really premium hand is that you might not get paid off. Some people might not have anything. Once you hit the flop, it's harder for them to hit the flop. And when you don't hit the flop with your pair of 5s, a lot of times there's going to be 3 overcards, which is, again, it's a very tough playing hand. You're going to get in a lot of trouble unless you really know what you're doing. In early position, it might be safer to discard the ace with the weak kicker, the small, low, medium pairs, and once you gradually go around the table, then you can start throwing more and more of those hands in your mix. Some starting hands and position up to one thing, which is part of your pre-flop strategy. Another very important thing in pre-flop strategy is what limit you're playing. In a lot of the examples, I'm going to think that we're playing a no-limit tournament in which you start out with 10,000 in chips. A lot of times the limits started out 25 and 50 in the blinds. There's no antes, which means you start out with 10,000. You can play a lot of poker for that 10,000 with only 25 and 50 blinds. You start out with 10,000, there's only $75 in the pot. So you have to consider what is your goal playing the different hands. Are you trying to just win the $75 that's in there, which will increase your stack to 10,075? It doesn't seem to be the right objective. You're trying to win bigger pots. Your main goal is to make as much money as possible, to increase your stack, to get a good spot in the tournament. And that's not going to happen if you're just trying to pick up the $75. Your strategy changes as we go on in the tournament. A little bit later, the blinds are going to be 50, 100, 100, 200. At some point, it's going to be 200, 400, and you might put 25 antes, and suddenly the bets are going to be a lot bigger. It's going to be interesting to pick up the blinds. You're starting out the tournament at a very low limit, and you're not just interested in picking up the blinds. That's going to be a significant strategy later. So what I recommend, actually in early stages of the tournament where your objective is obviously not to steal a blind to increase your stack from 10,000 to 10,075, is limping in. Limping in as a tactic is very powerful. A lot of times, early stages of the tournament, I will limp in with aces. I'm not interested in winning the 75. I'm interested to trap people, maybe make a big score early on in the tournament, which can be very powerful, get you in good position, have a lot of chips for later on. As we go on in the tournament, the strategy becomes much more different. When the limits are 200 and 400, and now suddenly you can, by winning the blinds, you increase your stack by 600. It's much more important to try and pick up the blinds. So one important key decision in your pre-flop strategy is to see what your goal is. When they're very small, your goal should be a little bit more of trapping people. So that all sums up to a good, sound pre-flop strategy, knowing what limits you're playing, knowing what good, solid, basic starting hands is, and what position you have around the table. Bluffing is a big part of No Limit Hold'em. Actually, you see a lot of very talented No Limit Hold'em tournament players. They step into a side game playing Limit Hold'em. There's a big difference between Limit Hold'em and No Limit Hold'em. You can't bluff in Limit Hold'em. No Limit Hold'em, you can't bluff. And you should do it, and you should do it often. You try it, take stab at pots, small bluffs, big bluffs, medium bluffs. It's going to work a lot of times. Of course, you're going to have to try and read your opponent, do it at the right time. Timing is very important, but bluffing is a big key in winning No Limit Hold'em tournaments. I have bluffed 2 players before, but again, it's also more interesting to get the hands shown at the end and kind of discuss the possible scenarios. So now we got the scenario where it was actually correct for me to bluff on the first king, but not the second king. So I mean, timing plays a big role in when you choose to make your bluffs. See, now he's afraid over there. I got him right where I want. I probably tend to bluff more than most of my opponents, but what I do a lot of times, I like to bluff small. Why bluff big when you can have the same result bluffing small, not risking as many chips?